It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Wow, fellow Quillers, can you believe the episode we have right now for you? It is exciting to have Ron Destro here to talk about his new book and his work as an active player in introducing new audiences to the Shakespeare authorship mystery through his work on so many levels. We've been working on bringing Ron to the program for some time now, and he's finally here. But before we continue our ever exciting exploration into the greatest literary mystery of all time, let me thank you first for being here and share a little bit of Quiller news with you before we begin with our guest. Update on the opening of registration for our Quiller event in Minneapolis this coming April. Here is a summary of the final details we are securing before we launch the online options for registration for this spectacular Shakespeare weekend we are planning. Your walking distance from the event venue hotel discount code will soon be ready for publication on the already waiting and newly generated event website. The lineup of Shakespearean scenes to be presented in the weekend's presentations has been decided. The producers of the event are already securing actors to portray the necessary roles and scholarly attorneys to explain the legal significance of the scenes to be presented. Details about local bonus performance features at the event venue and surrounding venues in Minneapolis will also be offered. And now here's the bitter truth. We're behind in our announcement date plans. It's true. We hope to have registration open by now, but there are still a few details to put in place before we can determine the complete registration levels. Those are being worked out, and it's coming very soon, folks, I promise. Our biggest holdup, ironically, in the final decisions is about the catering. We're securing the cocktail reception, coffee and Danish for the morning, some kind of mid-morning break, a buffet lunch on site at the venue, afternoon intermission break, and a potential bonus dinner. What a good number of people might not realize is that one of the most difficult aspects of planning any event always revolves around the food. Nobody needs a hangry audience, especially not me. So we're working on that. We want to provide attendees with the best experience we can at the best available price for the experience we are working to create for our participants. Curious onlookers, Quiller super sleuths, Shakespeare files, actors interested in Shakespeare, authorship scholars, astute legal minds, all will be welcome, but just give us a touch more time to lock down the final details. Those of you who have marked your calendars for April 11th through the 14th, 2024 to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota are going to be at the best Shakespeare weekend you have ever seen. But forgive us if we're a little particular about some of the details before we announce them. If you want to know the details before anyone else, send me an email asking to be added to our subscriber list, and you'll get our special newsletter, and you'll get it first. But my apologies, fellow Quillers, for the delay in the details of the event. But I assure you, we are working on providing you with the best Shakespeare weekend experience we can provide. Want to get on that subscriber list? Just send those emails to contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com, contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com to receive insider details about all things Quiller in nature, including all of the exciting details about our magnificent event in April 2024. But enough about that. My guest for this episode, fellow Quillers, is an award-winning and renowned producer, director, actor and writer. His name is Ron Destro. He has performed the Bard, he has directed the Bard, and he has now written a great book about the Bard. And we're here today to talk about his newest book, which he will tell us all about in this episode, as well as we'll touch on a few of his other books that he has written about the craft of the theater. Ron Destro, welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger.
It's an honor. Thank you, Stephen. And before we start, I just want to congratulate you on your well-deserved recent award from the Academy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's always nice to be recognized for doing something that you're passionate about and that I've been doing for so long. And so it is. It's a wonderful little accolade, and I have my little trophy prominently displayed in my home now. It's my second one, so I'm really thrilled to have garnered some attention in an area where my peers believe that I'm doing great work. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Congratulations.
Oh, terrific.
But congratulations to you on this new book that's coming out. Why don't we right off the top tell people the title of the book, what a brief synopsis of what it's about before we dive into it, and how they can get it. And then, of course, we'll repeat that again before the end of the episode.
Oh, okay. Well, the book is called The Starre, the Moone, the Sunne. And the premise of the book is that I wanted to primarily tell a real fun Elizabethan murder mystery, the solving of which you happen to discover who the real Shakespeare was. But I wanted to make sure I was following the advice of one of my old mentors from my days at RADA, in an American program at RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. One of my mentors there is a man named Malcolm Mackay, and Malcolm has directed at Shakespeare's Globe. And he advised me early on when I was starting this. He said, make sure that your focus is not to prove who Shakespeare was, but that your focus is to tell a really good story. And so that's what I've tried to do. And the premise of the book is, what if everything you learned about Shakespeare was a lie to protect the very crown of England? So I've created a few characters and included many historical figures as well. But the premise of the book is that one night, June 24th, 1604, a nobleman dies in his estate at King's Place in London. And King James is put into a panic when he hears about this. And so he has the Earl of Southampton arrested. And he also has a young printer named Nathaniel North, who is working on a secret pamphlet, also arrested. And the next day, the printer is executed. His 9-year-old son, Nicholas, wants to learn why his father was taken by the crown. And it takes him 20 years until 1624, when there's a fire in his print shop and he finds hidden parts of the pamphlet. And he pieces together that his father was taken and King James was panicked because he was about to print a story about William Shakespeare. And so this sets the young lad off on a journey to find out what it was about Shakespeare that couldn't be told. And so with the help of his two friends, the portly poet Arthur Taverner and the young, beautiful, and clever Valentina Childs, they set out to Stratford-upon-Avon and travel all around London to discover Shakespeare's story. And soon Arthur is taken, he's kidnapped. And so they elicit a band of researchers who set out to discover the truth. And hopefully they'll be able to find Arthur and also learn the story of why Nicholas's father was taken that important evening.
See, I love this so much because I have said many times on this program, and it is my true and firm belief that this is the key. This is the way to open the door of this mystery to new readers, new audiences, new skeptics of authorship are to be made through the use of historical fiction. I think historical fiction is one of the most popular genres in the world and always has been. In fact, if you look at so many of the plays of Shakespeare, they are exactly that. They are filled with historical fiction. And it's one of the reasons why the history plays particularly are so popular. And I think what you've done here is a magnificent thing, not only for readers who love a good mystery, not only for readers who love historical fiction, but also for those of us who believe that this secret of the real Shakespeare needs to be told. And you've told it in such a wonderful, compelling, and exciting way that I can't wait to see the response to the book among readers and critics when they finally get their hands on it.
Well, I agree that this is probably the best way to tell the story, and I'm one of these people who believes that historical fiction needs to be based on historical fact. So I try not to fudge any of the details. I mean, everything. I would say 95% of the book is based on true historical fact and events, and I think that's important so that the reader, when they read the story, they're, hopefully getting a good, interesting, fun tale, but they're also getting true history. And what I've tried to do, I mean, we have so many wonderful authorship writers who have taken the facts and put them together in nonfiction books. We have the great work of Alexander Waugh and Roger Strittmatter and Hank Whittemore and Diana Price and Captain Children. I mean, we have all of these wonderful books, but I wanted to appeal to someone who's looking for a good story, and we'll hopefully learn those same facts, but in a narrative. I mean, that's what movies do, right? I mean, that's why if you look at something like, I was always impressed with Shakespeare in Love, even though it's about the wrong guy. The success of that story is not because it's about Shakespeare, but it just happens to be a really great romantic comedy. And so I was trying to do the same thing with this book and make an interesting mystery.
I agree. And I think it's so fun to follow these characters through this historical landscape. And one of the things that I love about historical fiction, because I consume it, whether it be in TV series or movies or in novel form, it is one of my favorite genres because I'm such a giant history buff. And one of the things that my wife and I will do when we're watching a historical fiction series is, we both have our phones out and we start rabbit holing the details and the facts that are appearing through the story to check and see how accurate they are or how much poetic license the writers have taken. We were a big fan of the Vikings television series, and I learned so much about the real history of those early Saxon kings and of the early Viking leaders and how deep they were able to go into England and how far into the Mediterranean they were able to travel and up the Seine River in France. And I learned so much about that history through watching that series because I was compelled to go and look for the details online while watching. And I think that your book is going to do the same thing for readers. I think that they're going to find themselves looking up details and facts and going, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And then find it and going, wow, he's absolutely right. That's exactly what did happen. And the way you lace those facts and details into the life of your fictional characters is a really compelling and wonderful journey for the reader to follow and to kind of bounce from historical truth to truth through these, created, interesting, fun characters that have been your brainchild.
Right. Well, yeah, that's what I've tried to do.
First of all, because we haven't said, how can we get the book? I want to make sure we touch on that multiple times through the episode so that people can make sure to find it. I mean, obviously they can, go to the regular book locations like Amazon, etc., and type in Ron Destro. And P.S. folks, that's a really easy, just as it sounds, name to spell, Destro. And they'll find you, and they'll find some of your other books as well, I'm sure. But how can we get it? Where can we get it? When can we get it?
Well, the book is going to be, by the time this episode airs at the beginning of August, it'll be available for pre-sale, and it will be shipped out before the end of August. So it's right at the end of August. It will be ready for shipping. And it is available. It will be available as a paperback, an ebook, and as an unabridged audiobook narrated by the wonderful Derek Jacobi. And those will all be available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and wherever, as they say, all fine books are sold. And I have a page on rondestro.com, which is set up to direct people to the links. Contempo Publishing will also have something they could be purchased from their website as well. So it'll be anywhere you might imagine.
So it sounds like the easiest and best way for listeners to find out more about you and about your work and to find the book is to go to your website, rondestro.com. That sounds like the most comprehensive place to sort of rabbit hole Ron Destro and figure out what you're all about and what you've done and where to get this wonderful piece of fiction.
Yeah, there's a special page on the website for the Starre, the Moon, the Sun, and it has all the blurbs of these wonderful people who've already read the book and written wonderful things about it, and it's got it'll have links to how to purchase it.
It's an impressive list. Some of the folks that you were able to obtain quotes from about the book. I was looking through that list and some of the wonderful things they had to say. And I thought, wow, you've really put it out there to some big name people who have really enjoyed it and have had some wonderful words of praise to say about the work. I know, as a matter of fact, you mentioned that Derek Jacobi did the audio book version for you. When I saw him back in March in London, we had a moment to talk about the recording sessions that he was doing for the book. And he shared how much he enjoyed doing that voiceover and being a part of the project because he really also enjoyed the characters and enjoyed the story. There's a lot of sort of first person narrative going on there in the voice of the main character. Yes. And I think he, being an actor as he is, I think, he expressed that he really enjoyed sort of bringing that character to life vocally.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear. It's funny because I had Sir Derek in mind when I was writing the most recent drafts of the book, and because I saw the narrator is this sort of portly poet, drinker, sort of Falstaffian character, Arthur Taverner, and I had pictured Derek Jacobi playing that character, if we were doing a film of it. And so it's wonderful that we were able to work out a time where he could read the book because he does bring the character to life in the audio. So I'm so happy with what he's done in terms of enhancing the book.
I think it showed great foresight on your part to get that project going and secured and completed prior to the publication of the book. I think it's a wonderful launch sequence that you're now going to be able to share with readers and those who want to listen to it in their car or on their way to work or while they're gardening or doing their workout in their gym or whatever. The fact that they can access the book in on so many different platforms in so many different ways all at the same time, it's really smart promotion on your part.
Well, it's funny because I actually turned down 3 publishers who wanted to publish the book, but they didn't want to do the audiobook right away. And I thought it was important to do it. So I held out and finally found a publisher who realized the value of doing that. And since the pandemic, audiobooks have shot through the roof in terms of people buying them, because that's what people wanted to do, was to listen to them. And I probably listen to more audiobooks than I actually sit down and read. So I know the value of the convenience.
Now, oftentimes an audiobook will be read either by a famous celebrity with a wonderful voice like Derek Jacobi. Patrick Stewart does a lot of them, I know, as well, because he's got such a wonderful voice. I know Ian McKellen has done a few. But oftentimes an audiobook will be recorded by the author. Did you consider that? And why did you choose not to read it to us yourself?
Well, I perform in mostly Shakespeare. And in the old days, when I was studying in London, we were all trained to do the accent. And thankfully today, we don't do that anymore. So when I run the Oxford Shakespeare Company, which takes actors over to Europe every summer, and we perform Shakespeare plays in their historic locations. So recently we did Hamlet in Elsinore. We did Richard III on Bosworth Field. We did Henry V on Agincourt. And what the thing I love about it is I don't make everyone do a phony British accent. Everyone brings their own voice. Now you can do a character voice if you're playing, the gravedigger or a servant, but it's primarily your voice. And it's wonderful to hear, because we have actors from all over the world. So it's great to hear a collection of all those voices. I never even thought about doing this because the narrator is British. So I have faith in my British accent on stage, but I don't think I could sit through a 10-hour audiobook doing that accent. And there's just no better voice in the world than Derek Jacobi, I think.
I can't say I disagree. And I didn't even think about the aspect of, that would be difficult to maintain, and to maintain it accurately through, an entire recording of that length. That's an excellent point that I didn't consider. One thing I would like to ask though is, how do I audition for your Oxford Shakespeare Company? Because I would love to go do A Midsummer Night's Dream in Athens, if you're ready to do that one.
Well, you know what's funny is I was planning to do that in Athens when the pandemic hit. So I canceled it, but because we would have had to have rehearsed in masks, and it would have been very difficult. So I said, you know what, I'm going to wait until this is all over. But that is on our list of things to do. And I have a person in Athens, a wonderful actress who's working on the locations and so forth. So, well, it's easy. I have, there's a website, and there's a link to it from rondestro.com, but there's also a link to the Oxford Shakespeare Company at oxfordshakespeare.org. And that was whenever we have auditions, and now all the auditions are based, they're all video auditions. So actors send in, we have actors just graduate from college, still in university, or some 60s and 70s, who just want to do a Shakespeare play in an original setting. And we tie it into it's actually a workshop, so that people like Malcolm Mackay, who taught for years at RADA, and who, he taught a few people you might have heard of, like Mark Rylance and Ray Fiennes and Fiona Shaw. He and a guy named Ken Branagh. So he teaches our actors, and I direct the production. So it's a joint effort. But oxfordshakespeare.org has all that information. Usually at the beginning of the year, we'll decide what we're going to do in the summer, and we'll put up one or two plays, and then people can send in video auditions. And then once once you're chosen for a role, you memorize it. We all show up so actors throughout the UK and Europe and America are told on such and such a date, show up. This is the address in London. This is the rehearsal hall. Come memorize. And we work for a week. And then sometimes we have master classes with people like Derek Jacobi, or in the old days, John Barton, one of my old mentors from the Royal Shakespeare Company. And they would do a class, and Malcolm would work with the actors, and then I direct the production. And at the end of the week, we put it on.
That's very exciting. I'll be sure to be paying attention to find out when to send my video, because I'm serious. I'm gonna send you something.
Oh, you'd be more than welcome.
That's exciting, and I would love that opportunity. It would be a magnificent opportunity for any actor, and I would love to have a shot at that. So that's fantastic. And it's fantastic that you haven't done Midsummer in Athens yet, because that's fantastic and an incredible opportunity. I'm going to send you my best Oberon. But also, have you ever thought, did you think,
there we go.
Being that you're a Shakespeare authorship skeptic, and so many people, including, Richard Rowe, who wrote the magnificent book, Shakespeare in Italy, have you thought about doing A Midsummer Night's Dream in Sabbionetta, Italy, which is where Rowe believes, which is called the Little Athens of Italy? How about that? How about that idea?
Well, I've already contacted their government, but I tell you, we've done shows. I mean, Burnham Wood, Scotland, in Stratford-upon-Avon, all throughout England, Wales, Richard II in Wales, but the tricky thing is always Italy. We did do the Merchant of Venice in Belmont, at the Palace outside of Venice, but Italy is very tricky to get them to answer you, and there's a lot of bureaucracy, layers of bureaucracy. We were able to go to Belmont because that estate is still privately owned, so it had nothing to do with the government. But once you start dealing with Italian bureaucracy, and I'm Italian, so I know what it's like. I think you are too, Steve.
Yes, I am.
It gets difficult, So I'm trying to get some actors I know who live in Italy to help me out. That's the only way. But I did think of doing it there, yes, at the old oak tree.
I'm going to be going through there in September. My wife and I are spending 2 weeks in Italy, and we're sort of doing the Edward de Vere tour of Italy. And one of the places on our list, of course, is Sabbionetta and the Duke's Oak. At the Duke's Oak, we meet. So can't wait to. There's also the great statue of Minerva there in Sabbionetta that I want to see. So I'm very excited about going to visit that location. I
use Richard Rowe's book as sort of a guide as to where do I want to go and do what play. I tell you what really excites me is I want to do The Tempest on the Isle of Vulcano.
Oh, wow. Well, sign me up for that one too. And my wife is an actress as well. So you could possibly get 2 for 1 with this deal. You could get both Sables in the cast.
2 for 1.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. That would be great. I look forward to it.
Well, getting back to the book, I want to talk a little bit about some of the fun characters that we meet through your book and where you get the inspiration for those characters. Obviously, you have one character, Nicholas, and that's also the name of your son, who the book is dedicated to in the beginning. And so that's obviously an easy connection there. I don't know that the character Nicholas is anything like your son, Nicholas, but tell us about some of the inspiration for the characters. I've talked to other fiction writers who say that the characters just sort of create themselves and tell them the story and they write it down. Is that sort of how it felt for you when you were writing this book?
Yes, there was some conscious decision. And by the way, Nicholas, my son actually was named after the character rather than the other way around, because I had originally written this story or an early version of the story as a screenplay and 20 years ago. And so I I wrote it, and there was a big Hollywood director interested in it and so forth. But at the time, although I went out to meet with the agents at CAA, and everyone was excited about it, this was at the same time that Anonymous was also at CAA. And even though they liked my screenplay, they said, we don't think we can get this done because we know Anonymous is going to get done because it's owned by Tom Hanks. So they said, we're just going to have to wait on this. And so here, 20 years, then after that, I became a father. And this story is as much about fathers and sons and sacrifice as anything else. And so I could not have written the new version of the story without having gone through being a father. My son is only 18. So having the wonderful experience of having Nick, that informed how I was going to update the story. And I believe the reason why we don't know today who Shakespeare really was is because of a father's sacrifice for his son. And that comes out in the book. But so Nicholas was actually named after the character in the book. But the other characters I did, I throw in, they're sort of odes to authorship researchers. I have either loosely or thickly disguised 42 Shakespeare authorship people, many of whom are friends of ours, whose names are sort of concealed within the book. And actually, I'm going to, once the book comes out, I'm going to offer a free signed copy to anyone who can name all 42 of these. They're mostly Oxfordian, I think, researchers. And there'll be details about how they can get that to me, and I'll pull a name out of a hat and we'll pick a winner. But so there is this group of researchers. There is a Professor Charles Ogburn, and there is a Master John Loney, and there are characters who there's a Johnny Rollitt, who's named after John Rollitt, one of the authorship researchers. So that group of people were sort of based upon real people I know or know of. And but it's true, yes, a lot of the characters sort of came out of almost, how a lot of writers say, I just felt like I'm an instrument and God or whatever was sort of writing this book through me, and I'm just this instrument to put it down on paper. And I kind of felt that way. Sometimes I'll read a section of it and say, how on earth did I ever think of that? So it's been shaped, the story's been shaped over 20 years. And I'm just very happy with how it turned out. But yeah, I don't know where a lot of the characters came from, although some of my favorites are historical. The one that's actually based on my son it's a true story I learned in researching the Elizabethan theater scene. There is a subplot about a young boy actor who gets kidnapped off the streets, and he's taken into the Children of the Chapel. And that his name is Thomas Clifton, and his father finds a way to get his son back, because it was perfectly legal in the Elizabethan age for Queen Elizabeth to have any boy taken off the streets or out of his home and put into the chapel choristers for her, just like she could take anyone and send them in the Navy. So this was a true story, and I was so interested in this story, and I can't. So I think my relationship with Nick is almost the relationship of the Cliftons in the book. But there was another interesting story that I found in researching, and that is there was a boy, I call him the boy with the borrowed name, and he was a member of the children's company, and he went by the name of Henry Evans, although that was not his given name, and we don't really know what his given name was. But not long after that, and the Earl of Oxford was the patron of these boys. It was Oxford's boys. He changed his name to Henry Oxford, and this is a true story. And nobody really knows why he did that and what their connection was exactly. But so it was interesting to find the book deals also, besides looking at the powerful love of fathers, the joys of turnips, it also touches on briefly the perils of the plague, because that was an important part of the story. And again, those pages in the book, I think, are enriched because of what we all have been through in the last 3 years.
That's incredible. And, I love that you touch on this relationship connection that is very prevalent in the book, that I also believe is very prevalent in the Shakespeare authorship mystery. And it is, I believe, the secret to the mystery is a father-son connection and a father-son love and relationship. And as you mentioned, that sacrifice that fathers are willing to make for their sons and for any of their children. Myself, I have 3 children. My first 2 children are daughters, and then we were blessed with a little boy. And I can't say that it changed me in any way as a father. Obviously, I love my daughters just as much as I do my son, but there is a difference in the type of love that you have for a daughter than you have for a son. And so there was an enlightenment in my own life upon suddenly having a little boy in our lives. And I think my wife would say the same thing about our little boy. I can't, and I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking, I could not even imagine the type of anguish and pain that I would feel if some monarch were able to snatch my son from me and conscript him into service of any kind, whatever that might be. And I don't care if it meant that he was going to live a quote unquote better life or a privileged life in the court or under the crown. That's my child. I want to be with my child, and I want my child to be with me. And that would be such a terrible nightmare to have to endure.
Yeah. And that's why I was so taken with the story that I wanted to include it. And it is relevant because he was taken into Oxford's boys. And I don't think Oxford knew how his boys were being taken. So, and I address that in the book.
That's very interesting. And then, of course, many of our listeners know that the prevalent, and I'd say it is now the most prevalent theory about authorship involves definitely the relationship between Oxford and the Earl of Southampton. And whether you fall in one camp or the other with regards to what that relationship was, that relationship is the secret. It is the key. There is no doubt in my mind. And you touch on that as well within the book. And, spoiler alert, but I think most of my listeners are aware of the succession theory that is what we're now calling it. And I think that's a much better title for it than, Prince Tudor theory. And I think that the way you address it through the book and keep it for those readers who maybe aren't as knowledgeable about this topic, the way that you reveal these certain aspects of that mystery, as well as the mystery of your characters that have their own secrets, makes it such a compelling mystery novel. And, the great murder mystery that's involved in the fictional way is also some of the fun of the reading as we follow these characters through their journey in this historical world. Well,
it's funny how I remember when I was emailing you about, okay, now let's not give away this spoiler or that spoiler. I started listing them, and I just realized how many spoilers there were, and I guess that's what makes hopefully an interesting mystery book is that there's just one thing upon another, and one of the bylines in the book says, things are never as they seem. And so there are a lot of twists and turns, and there are a lot of spoilers. But I have a friend of mine from my days in London, Keith Cole, who was a wonderful actor. We were talking about great mystery books, and he said that the best mystery book is where you don't know who done it until the last page, but even better, the last paragraph, but even better than that, the last line of the book. And so I've always kept that in mind when writing. And so there are a lot of things that are revealed towards the end of the book. And then there's this sort of one final flourish for the finish. And so I wanted to keep people guessing and turning pages and hopefully interested in the story to the very end. I think that's important for a book like this.
Well, I always believe that, as we talked about the inspiration for the characters and the characters sort of telling you their story, it leads to feverish writing. And so I sort of, as I was reading, and then feverish writing leads to page turning on the part of the reader. And so, as I'm reading through the book, I sort of had this image of you in my mind sitting at a computer. Actually, in my mind, it was a typewriter, even though nobody uses typewriters anymore, but just like banging away as these characters were feeding you, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And you sort of like struggling to keep up, because there are places in the book where you are, I was reading a digital copy, so I wasn't literally turning pages, I was scrolling, but here I am like, luckily right. I have a laptop that has, that is a touch screen. So I didn't have to use a mouse. I'm literally scrolling the screen with my fingers, and there's this streak up the right side of my screen as I'm like, going through page by page. And so I hope that listeners will get a sense of that and feel the same way when they get a copy. I'm not a fan of screen reading. I prefer having an old-fashioned paper in my hands type of book. I prefer to have the book, curled up on the sofa or in bed or wherever and turning those page. Is just, old school version of me. But some people love their Kindles or they love their tablets and read all of their stuff online or on screen. But I don't know that it gives you the same sense. And in a historical fiction novel like this, I kind of feel like you need to feel the paper under your fingers as you're leafing through, especially since, you have characters that are involved in printing. And it's such a literary based story, being that there's Shakespeare involved. So hopefully folks will get a hard copy and read it the old fashioned way.
I agree. And there was a lot of, a lot of the scenes with the researchers, there is just a flurry of activity. And he's saying, well, go, see what did Ben Jonson say about that? And who's got that portrait? And what does the will say here? And so there's this activity that, so I think a lot of that did sort of fly into my mind pretty quickly. And and also there's a very rapid sort of witty repartee between these two servants, Mutt and Boyle. And they are always observing and commenting on, well, there's Christopher Hatton and there's Dudley and here's the Earl of Oxford. And so they're all they do is sit in the corner, and instead of serving drinks, they're drinking drinks and gossiping, all their court gossip about the Italianate Earl, and this one is sleeping with that one, and so forth. And so all of that flies pretty quickly off the page, and I think it came pretty quickly to me as well. I mentioned in an email to you that it's funny, one of the book has its protagonists, and then it's got to have some antagonists, and one of the antagonists is Sir Christopher Hatton, and who many authorship people, doubters, sort of believe was an antagonist to Oxford. And, there's some question about that, but I chose him to be one of the people who's sort of brutally made fun of in this book. And when we went to talked to an audiobook producer, they said, your director is going to be a woman named Cherry Cookson. Now, Cherry Cookson is one of the great audiobook directors and radio drama directors in England. And so I was very excited to have her work on directing the audiobook. And she sent me a very friendly email. And she said, oh, we're very excited to do this. And Derek's excited. And so, and by the way, I am a descendant of Sir Christopher Hatton. And
oh, no.
all the men in my family. Yeah. That all the men in my family have Hatton as a middle name. We're so proud of him. And I said, oh, I am so sorry. I apologize. But, I said, every book needs an antagonist. But she was sort of half joking about it, but I did apologize to her.
Well, it's not your fault, because it's very clear that the Earl of Oxford did not care for Hatton. It's very clear that there were other members of the court who did not care for Hatton, that Hatton believed that he was above many of them and behaved in such a way. I think everyone on every level of scholarship agrees that Malvolio is a caricature of Hatton and is meant to lampoon him in the most fantastical way. And I think we're all pretty clear on that.
Not only that, but in this book, you'll get to see Oxford gull Hatton into wearing yellow stockings and cross garters.
I know, and I love that aspect of it. There's so much wonderful, rich insight that you bring as the author, and it's very clear. As I said, when in reading it, I had these images of you, sitting there banging it out, and it's because of the rich history that you have. Not only as an authorship skeptic and an Oxfordian, but also as a Shakespeare file, somebody who has spent so many years of your life getting to know these works inside and out, not just from a literary perspective, but from a performance perspective, which I think is old. I'm tooting my own horn here as well, but I believe that is an ultra layer of understanding of these works that those who only know them from a scholarship perspective are missing out on. I think you need to know these as performance works, to have studied them for the stage, whether as a director or an actor, to really be able to get inside the text and really get inside the minds of some of these characters. And I think that you demonstrate that in your writing through the book as well.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, there is a lot of insight that comes from being an actor, I think, that's in the book. But the real Shakespeare knew that too. So it's important. He was a man who no doubt got on stage and performed. And so I think, it's interesting. I was thinking of how I know you've talked to Derek about the fact that he believes it doesn't really matter when you're acting the role who the real Shakespeare is. And I've also, Michael York is a good friend, and Michael has said the exact same thing. And I asked Jeremy Irons about it as well. And they all sort of agree that even though we have a different view on who the playwright was, when you're playing the role, you're playing the role. And you're playing the given circumstances of that character. However, I think what's different with me is that when I play the role and I know that these were written by someone else, it does feel different to me. There's a resonance. And it may be also because when I'm standing on the battlefield of Agincourt, which is now mostly a cornfield now, and I know that there are all these dead soldiers they were buried in the ground right there, French and English. And, so when I'm running across the field, I think one of the characters I played was the Earl of Oxford in that play. And I'm running to meet Henry, across that field where I know that, so many 100 years ago, this really happened. And this was written by someone who had family there and who knew well some of these characters and the descendants of these characters. It gives me a resonance that you wouldn't get if you just didn't think of the authorship at all.
I absolutely agree with you. It was one of the most profoundly disappointing moments in my episode with Derek when he made that comment. And it's not that I haven't heard that comment before from many other actors. And I get it. I understand the philosophy of your job as an actor is to play the character and tell the character's story. But then why have dramaturgy at all? Why have scansion at all if you believe that the writer's intent has no bearing on the character? That seems to me just so antithetical to the way I approach performance. Now, maybe a big part of that is because I'm also a director and not just an actor. And from a director's standpoint, I think the more you can know about the play, the more you can know about the writer and the intent behind the writer's creation of these characters and the story the writer is trying to tell, I think the better informed your direction is and the more rich your actors' performances are going to be under your tutelage as their director. And so that might be my inability to separate myself as actor from director. But it's crazy to think that you could do Streetcar Named Desire and not care about Tennessee Williams' life and how much it plays out through that play. And I use that example because I tend to believe that the author character, I believe that there's an author character in every novel. I believe there's an author character in every play. And the author character in A Streetcar Named Desire is Blanche Dubois. He is her. And and knowing that, and knowing his life and understanding that, the actress playing her can bring so much more to who she is on the stage, I feel. So I have trouble with that statement.
Well, yeah, I agree that I think it's extremely important. The authorship question is extremely important for the director. And then the director can pass on to the actors what might be helpful. For example, the last show we did with the Oxford Shakespeare Company was at Hedingham Castle. And we did, appropriately enough, All's Well That Ends Well. And so many people, of course, have a problem with that play because the ending, because they don't understand the relationship that Bertram and Helena are really, I think they're Edward and Anne. And so my thinking when I direct that play is that at the end, when he says, he accepts her, the king says, take her hand, and he does gladly. Knowing the historical counterpart to those people, Bertram, who had the bed trick played upon him, what I always do is I have him sort of reluctantly hold his hand out and he takes her hand. But then I have everyone start to leave the stage, the king, and then followed by the servants and so forth. And finally, Bertram sort of indicates to Helena, go follow the king. And she does. And he goes off and he follows that other girl, I forget her name, the one he wanted to sleep with. She goes off the other way and he follows her. So you can clearly see that he's not accepting Helena as his bride. And that's not written in the play, but I think that's written in the meaning of the play based on knowing who these characters really were. So if a director understands that, and then you tell your actors the first thing I do whenever I meet my actors is say, look, this is what I believe. You don't have to believe it. It's not a cult. You don't have to join, but I believe Shakespeare was, and then I tell them briefly, and then, I say, well, you can believe it or not, that's okay. But these plays were written by the most brilliantly educated, amazing man with this great vast experience of life and the court in Italy and all that. So I let them know. And I also say, don't be frustrated if you don't understand the play, because this was written by this most amazing mind, and most of his colleagues didn't understand what he was writing, because it's just so brilliant.
I do the exact same thing, and usually, what happens then is through the rehearsal process, when you are in the middle of rehearsing a scene and I start sharing some of the details. Well, here's what's happening here. Here's who this character is based upon in the real history, and why this scene is so important, and why this character is lampooning this, or why this character is speaking these lines. And, inevitably the actors will turn to me and say, how do you know all of this? Where is that? I don't see that in the annotations. I don't see that in the notes in the back of the script. I don't. How do you know all of this? Well, because I happen to know who the real author is and how his autobiography is laced through these works. And it makes it easy when you know this man's life is underneath the text. And inevitably, by the end of the rehearsal process, if they care, they have become, at the very minimum, sleuths who want to solve the mystery themselves. In most cases, they're converts. They become Oxfordian in their thinking, and they start reading the plays from an Oxfordian perspective, and the plays open up themselves to you in ways that they cannot from a Stratfordian perspective.
That's true. That's true. And what I've tried to do in the novel is take all of that material and try to make some sense of it. In other words, if there was a Will Shakespeare from Stratford, how did he become William Shakespeare, the guy who was thought to be the writer? How did that connection to the Chamberlain's men happen? And so I've tried to invent what I think is a plausible story that shows how this young man in Stratford could then be taken up by a troupe of players and taken to London, and how this whole misunderstanding could happen, presented in a logical way.
That's an excellent aspect of the book, and something that most people are curious about. When you meet somebody and you talk to them, this is a big part of my life. I host a podcast series that's now, more than halfway through its 5th season, 120 episodes. I wear my shirt, I wear my hat. I have Don't Quill the Messenger stuff all around me. So, this is a big part of my life. And so it inevitably comes up in conversation all the time. And when it comes up in conversation with someone who is new to this and isn't familiar with the details, and I start sharing little tidbits with them about it, one of the main questions that pops up is, well, how did history get it wrong? Why did history get it wrong? And that's the part that most people, I don't feel, have really been able to answer appropriately. And you attempt to do that in the book. And I think that that's a great aspect of the book, especially because I believe that your book is going to introduce new readers, new people to this whole mystery in a different way. And it's going to answer some of those initial questions for them. Now, one of the things I always say about this program particularly, and about my approach to it all, is I don't have all the answers. I don't know all of the secrets. That's why I'm so intrigued. It's why I keep asking questions about it and keep diving into every aspect of it I can. It's why I welcome any and all guests who are interested in this. Let's turn over every stone. Even if it's been turned over 100 times before, there might be a new ant crawling under there we didn't see the 100th time before. But I think that the beauty of it is everyone can sort of take their own journey, follow their own paths, find a connection with different characters involved, and decide that that's the character they want to go and rabbit hole. Some people, their big thing is Thomas Nash appeals to them, and they go digging into Nash. Some it's Kid, some it's Lily. Some it's the Earl of Essex. Whichever character in these circles that surround this mystery appeals to you, just like in any Shakespeare play. Whatever character touches you is the character you're going to watch through the play. And everyone gets to take their own journey with every play. Everyone gets to take their own journey with this mystery. And you give them a variety of different journeys to take through your characters in the book.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I think what's important is finding a narrator that is interesting to listen to. It's funny because I'm writing a new book now. It's actually about India, and I miss Arthur Taverner's voice. So he's such a fun character to just hear speak and tell a story that I'm struggling to say I've got to try to find another narrator for my new novel that's just as interesting as Arthur. So my publisher has already asked if there will be another Arthur Taverner mystery. So we are playing with that. We're toying with that idea right now because Arthur did say he was planning on writing a book of his own. And so there is a little blurb at the very end of the book saying the next book will be, it was the book that Arthur was planning on, and it's called, this is the title of the book, The Troublesome Adventures of Old Agnes of Aylesbury, a joyful romp round the gardens of Cheapside with a beautiful alekeep named Agnes and her noble, courageous, and comely knight, Sir Arthur Drinkwell, accompanied by his young page, Bantickle Prickling of Stickleback.
Those are definitely Shakespearean names, if ever I've heard them before.
That may be the sequel.
Dickens had a lot of fun with names that way, too. I think he got a lot of his inspiration from Shakespeare. If you look at the characters in Dickens' novels.
It's funny because I was sort of modeling. He was my model. I was always thinking if Dickens wrote this story, how would he write it? And that's kind of what I was aiming for, a Dickensian telling of a Shakespearean story.
Well, except Charles Dickens does. I love Dickens, and I have one of my prized book collections. Is I have some very, very old antique copies, the pocket size copies of his complete works. That I picked up at an antique bookstore years and years ago. They're prized possessions of mine on my bookshelf. But, I love Dickens, but he can also bog down in the weeds, and I mean literally the weeds. He'll tell you the color of the leaf that is falling off the tree onto the path before the cart comes rushing by. The opening to The Tale of Two Cities with its famous line, as it were, is also very droll until you get to what's really going on. So he can be a little overly descriptive in a lot of ways. And you don't do that. That's something that does not happen in your book.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, the original manuscript, the current manuscript comes in at about 81,000 words, which is average for a novel. The original manuscript was 122,000 words. And so I worked a lot with my editor, the publisher, and my agent on how to get that down. And again, it just goes back to remember your objective is not to prove an argument, sort of this dry polemic, but your objective is to just further the story and tell an interesting, fun story. And so that helped me cut it down. And then knowing I wanted to do an audiobook that was not going to be an abridged version, I wanted it to be unabridged. I realized that I'd have to cut it down for Derek. So that actually helped in the editing process quite a bit.
That's interesting, and I'm glad that you brought that out, because then it tells us a little bit about the process of the writer from a publishing standpoint, not just the creative standpoint. But I love that you share those word counts, and that's a lot of cutting. That's a lot of editing down. You're talking about 20% of the book that ended up, as it were, on the cutting room floor. Then, right?
Yes, and that's why I left it open for another Arthur Taverner mystery, because I could always add those wonderful pearls into his second story.
Well, it sounds like you might have a whole series of Taverner's Tales here that you're going to be creating along the line. I could see book 3, book 4, book 5. Cover art is going to become really interesting and fun as you get some great artist to draw us a picture of what Arthur Taverner actually looks like, and then marry that image to the character throughout the series that you're about to start writing.
Right. Yes. And I'm so happy with the cover that we were able to get. I think you know Ralph Walker Smith.
I do.
He did such a wonderful job with the cover.
He's a brilliant graphic artist. He does some incredible work, and also just a really pleasant guy too. I like Ralph a lot. He's a really nice, fun guy. And I'm so glad that you were able to get him in on the project. The cover is beautiful, and we'll be using it as part of the art for this episode as it goes out as well.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah. And so I was thinking now some of Taverner's mysteries that he could solve. For instance, maybe he could solve the mystery of the death of the 2 Henrys. There's a good follow-up potential there. How about the mystery of what happens to Elizabeth Trentham after the death of her husband? And how her life turns out. That could be a very interesting storyline to follow. Whatever happened to Henry Vere, the illegitimate child of the Earl of Oxford and Anne Vavasour? Whatever happened to that cat?
Right.
You know, we could follow him down some rabbit hole too, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Actually, it's funny because in the original, I had to cut from the story, but the Anne Vavasour sends Oxford an interesting Dear John letter, and I had to cut that. But, there's so much. There's so many interesting tales and adventures that can be told. So as long as Arthur gets to chase his Ale Keep Alice around Cheapside, then he's good for a few other stories.
Excellent. I love where this is going, and I'm excited to see these all start appearing on bookshelves near you. That's incredible, Ron. That's a lot of fun. Before we wrap things up, though, I did want to touch on, this is not your first foray into publishing, and it's not your first book. And it's also, you've written other books, particularly about the craft that we both love so much, the craft of theater and of acting. But you've also written some stage plays, including a stage play on this topic. And I'd like to touch on that just a little bit before we go, because that sort of sets the table for a future episode where we can come back and talk about your play.
Oh, okay. I am reworking the play because actually it was Michael York had asked if I could turn my Shakespeare talk into a play. And so I said, oh, sure. Yeah. Because, he wanted to play the Earl of Oxford in it. And I thought that'd be a lot of fun. So I turned my presentation, Who Really Wrote Is Will Shakespeare, into a 3-man play, and where the Earl of Oxford comes back to life and Shakespeare comes back to life, and there's a professor who's sort of mediating between them, and they're both claiming to be the real true author, and it's basically a comedy.
It's very funny. It's extremely witty and very funny, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And as an actor, found myself while I was reading it wanting to play all 3 roles because there's just so much fun in each of the roles, and the way that the banter is delivered and the way the lines are written. It's very, very clever, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it.
Oh, great. Well, I've decided to maybe do an upgrade with it, and actually, because it's kind of a bare bones presentation with 3 actors, and I'm thinking of actually going back. I've started writing it and having the spirits of these guys still come back. But it's now set in Stratford-upon-Avon at the time of the planning of the first Jubilee.
Oh, nice. David Garrick's Jubilee?
Yes.
Yep. His non-Jubilee.
Non-Jubilee.
He first of all, he lied about which year anniversary it was to make it a nice round number. Then he chose, a location that nobody could prove had anything to do with the works of Shakespeare. And then he didn't even present a single Shakespeare play. And then the stuff that he did present got totally rained out, and it was a sopping mess and a complete failure. But that is the origins of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust and what has now become Shakespeare Land in Stratford-upon-Avon. I love that as a setting. That's a great idea.
Yeah, so that's the set. At least he tells them to clean up the place.
Right. This place is too shabby to be the home of Shakespeare. You got to do something about that.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So yeah, I'm doing a new version of that, and because my background is mostly in playwriting.
Well, when it's ready, we'll have to have you back on the series, and we'll do an episode about the play and some of the fun moments there. And maybe we can even share a couple of pages of dialogue together from it, because that might be fun for the listeners as well. Because it's very clever and very funny, and it does need to be performed. Absolutely. I'm deep into preparing for my performance of Hank Whittemore's Shakespeare's Treason, which he and I worked together last year to convert into a piece that any actor can now perform as a monodrama. And I look forward to premiering that version of it in April. We'll be doing that in April in Minneapolis.
That's great. Hank is brilliant.
He is. And it's so exciting to finally, we've been working on this for years together, and now we finally have the completed version for any actor, and I get to be that actor, and we're now working on putting the production together for April. So I'm deep into that right now, but once that one's under my belt, I'll be open and available for other roles. So we'll have to talk. That'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Let's talk.
Well, I'm telling you, fellow Quillers, if you haven't already, you need to visit rondestro.com. That's rondestro.com, RONDESTRO.com. It sounds just like it. It's spelled just like it sounds. So go visit. You'll find everything you need to know about Ron. You'll find details about some of his other work. You'll find details about the Oxford Shakespeare Company. You'll find details about some of the books that he has written for actors and about the craft of acting, as well as the way to get the Starre, the Moon, and the Sun. We did not talk about the title, and I know we did that on purpose. I'm certain listeners are going, why is it called that? What is the title? Well, you'll have to get the book and read it to find out, because Ron specifically asked me not to ask him about the title and why it's called that. You get to discover who is the star, who is the moon, and who is the sun by reading this great mystery novel that I believe is going to really open doors for a lot of people into this magnificent literary mystery that we call Shakespeare authorship. Thank you so much, Ron, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure, and what a wonderful episode. I can't wait to get the feedback from listeners about it. Thanks again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's always great to talk to you, Stephen. Thank you.
Before we conclude this episode, I want to remind you that details about our magnificent Quiller event in Minneapolis coming this April will soon be fully announced, and the first to learn of the special details with early bird specials and more will be those who are subscribed to our email newsletter. If you're not subscribed, just send me an email to ask to be added to the list. Send those emails to contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. Itineraries, registration, info, hotel deals, performance ticket specials, and all of that will be included in the email before any full public announcement. So get on the list to learn about everything first. And I promise you, we're wrapping up those final details now, and it's coming very, very soon. I want to thank our gracious patrons and sponsors who continue to help make all of this happen for the Quiller Nation. And I want you to know we certainly cannot do it without you patron Quillers. And now, here to announce our August Quiller of the Month is our very own producer, Jake.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, Quillers. It is the first episode of August, and so it is time to pick our official Quiller of the Month for August 2023. Where does the time go, ladies and gentlemen? If you're not sure what this is, well, head on over to patreon.com/don'tquillthepodcast, and you can learn all about it. All eligible patrons over at the Patreon are entered into this monthly contest, the winner of which gets the walk around with their head held high for the entire month, of course, and just the clout of being Quiller of the Month. I assume you tell all of your friends and family and strangers on the street as you walk along. Hi, by the way, my name is yada yada. I am the Quiller of the Month. You, of course, get any item of your choosing from the shop over at dragonwagonshop.com. Tons of really fantastic Don't Quill merchandise there. We've got shirts, we've got mugs, we've got brand new Don't Quill the Messenger hats. Lots of fun stuff there that goes to the winner. And without further ado, I put all of the eligible patrons into the random name generator, and the Quiller of the Month for the month of August is Cathaleen Riley Bishop. Cathaleen Riley Bishop. Thank you so much for your continued support of the program, and congratulations. Keep your eye out on your email and your Patreon messenger. We'll explain to you how you can claim your free swag. Thanks to each and every one of you who continue to show your support for this podcast by being patrons over at patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jake. Always good to have you pop in. And don't forget, Quiller Nation, by becoming a Patreon patron at the serial Quiller level or above, you not only qualify for the Quiller of the Month drawing, but you gain special access to our growing library of bonus feature episodes. The last 2 bonus episodes have featured deeper dives into Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra. But you have to become a serial Quiller to listen to those special bonus features. So visit our Patreon page today to learn more. I'd like to thank our special guest once more, Ron Destro. Don't forget to visit Ron's website to find out details about how to get his book. And thank you all again for being here every fortnight to join us on this wonderful exploration into this compelling literary mystery. And until next time, fellow Quillers, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.